So the challenges are focused, they're quite high level for a start, and they're really focused on the urban form, housing and transport. I'm not going to go through every aspect of these challenges. The foundation report is available online, and so I'm only going to go through some of the aspects that actually relate to the Te Papa Peninsula and sort of more Tauranga. But I'd encourage you to have a look at the foundation report if you're interested. So the first one is about housing in Tauranga, unfortunately, is increasingly unaffordable. When the cost of housing gets over 5 times your income, we'd say that you're in housing stress. 7.3 times your income, Tauranga is well and truly in housing stress by many people's indicators. But you'll see on there the Western Bay of Plenty sub-regional development capacity over the next 30 years. When you drill into that graph, they're basically telling us that we've got about 18 months worth of development capacity, and that's in greenfield and some of the intensification. And that's one of the reasons why the Te Papa intensification work is so vitally important for the region, because it enables more intensification to happen in the right places, but it also enables a different type of housing to happen. And the rest of the stats up there are just sort of some interesting bits around housing. The one that's probably the most interesting for me is the cost, the average weekly rent. The key thing to note with that is my data is from October 2017. When you do a quick Trade Me search on rents within Tauranga, they're probably higher than that now, which is cause for concern. So we've got both affordability in terms of buying a house and affordability in terms of living, and they're not necessarily good things. So I took the bus for the first time to work in Tauranga today, and it was a fascinating experience. I stood out in a wet road waiting for a bus that did turn up on time, and I was one of 8 people using the bus, and I had to leave 10 to 7 in the morning to get where I wanted to go. So when you look at Tauranga and the Western Bay of Plenty in terms of the public transport journeys per capita, it's fairly low. It's right up there with, I think, Townsville and maybe Newcastle. But when you look down at that public survey on Tauranga's transport options, that suggests that there's quite a high latent demand and willingness to use public transport. So to me, the challenge then is actually matching where the services to where people want to go. And the reason why I've kind of said in the challenge statement that our lack of housing supply, suitable housing and transport choice is so critical is because if you can't access the supermarket, if you can't access the doctor and the hospital and your job and other things without necessarily owning a car, then it's not necessarily a good social outcome for everyone, because not everyone can afford a car. So this is why we focus quite a lot on the public transport system in this. The other one picture, which is I find actually really fascinating, is the greenhouse gas emissions. So when you look at that graph, a huge amount of the Bay of Plenty's greenhouse gas emissions are coming from transportation. So that's every vehicle, every bus, everything moving and the exhaust pumping out. When you start looking at some of the goals that the government has and potentially New Zealand has for greenhouse gases and reducing that in terms of climate change, you start kind of working through in your head that that actually means quite a structural change to how New Zealand moves. It means more than just me buying an electric car or a hydrogen fueled car. It actually means me completely changing the way I travel to and from work and how my family travels to be much, much more sustainable. It does probably mean that we're looking more at buses than private vehicles. So when you start adding all these things together, you start getting a really fascinating picture of what may happen in 50 years' time.